People, the headlines, the issues impacting you, all on This Week in Cincinnati on 9 on Your Side.
Welcome back, everyone. This morning on This Week in Cincinnati, we're talking with Dwight Ferrell, SORTA's Chief Executive Officer and General Manager, and joining us as well as WCPO transportation reporter Pat LaFleur. We spent a lot of time talking about the Cincinnati Bell Connector, the streetcar, but there is something really, really enormous happening, or potentially, in our community, and that is what's happening with Metro and the need for potentially a sales tax increase. Can you talk to us about that?
Well, the Board of Trustees is still debating that issue. In fact, we have a board meeting Tuesday where it'll also be a subject to be discussed about what to do. We as staff have provided the board with a lot of information about what our future looks like in terms of funding and that sort of thing. And so the board's still debating and discussing and deciding what to do next.
But the crux of the issue is you all need money, and you also feel to bring your systems up to speed, and you feel you need to change the patterns of where the buses go, correct?
I think that's simplified.
Is that simplified?
That's simplified. That's simplified. The way I see it is that for the city of Cincinnati, Hamilton County, the region, to grow, to be able to attract and retain talent for the 21st century, a robust public transportation system like Metro is essential. And we can't do that with the current level of funding.
Can I ask what's changing about the sources of funding over the last few years that's kind of creating this budget gap that we're beginning to see? What's going away? What's happening?
Well, to be quite honest, the issues about funding have been decades in the making, from a loss of operating subsidies back in the 80s to not having a lot of state or federal funding over the last 20 or 30 years or so. And then, quite frankly, our expenses grow at a rate that's greater than revenue. So we are funded primarily through the city's earnings tax. For 2017, approximately $53 to $54 million. That's about 54% of the total budget.
And that goes only to bus service.
And that only goes to bus service.
Not for the streetcar.
None of this money goes to the streetcar. None. Did I say that none of it goes to the streetcar?
None.
Okay.
Yes, we understand.
Okay. And so then we get about approximately $19 million from fares. So on a $96 million operating budget, 54 and 19, so you can see where the bulk of the money comes from. And it's just is not enough to be able to do what we need to do. And I'd also like to point this out that in 2009 or so, like every other entity in the country, we saw this economic downturn. And Metro reduced service by about 20% and made the decision at that point that rather than shrinking the footprint of the service area, it would thin it out. And so it spread headways. And so as a result of that, we have trips and services every hour. And so if I've got to take two buses and one's an hour and the other one's an hour headway, if they don't meet up precisely, then I've got a really long day. And then service doesn't run as late or as early and what have you. So that's what's happened that the organization has done to be able to try to fit within its financial constraints. But this situation about Metro's funding has been literally decades in the making, and it would be a much longer conversation than what we have time here to talk about be able to go to explain. Specifically
to the person watching at home, what it means to them at home, the issues related to this, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that the routes to work have changed. The places where businesses and opportunities have changed.
The frequency of service to those locations has changed. And yes, some of the areas we don't serve anymore.
And so some people have an extra 4 hours on their day to get to and from.
That is very possible. Yes.
Because there's such a shortage.
Because the service just isn't frequent enough. And so then people make alternatives or they give up or whatever the case may be. And the challenge is that, again, going back, public transportation in this day and time is about economic growth. In fact, when our board, when we did our strategic plan, our 5-year strategic plan from 17 to 2021, part of our mission statement is about helping drive economic growth in this community and recognizing that public transportation is one of those things that businesses look at and look for when they're making a decision to relocate or expand their business. So the more jobs that get created here, as a citizen who may own real estate, your property value goes up, the more development that comes along the transportation corridor, and that's why this is important.
All right, let's go over it. We have a full screen, actually, we can show everybody that a report from a consultant hired by SORTA outlined 3 levy options. Take a look at these. They would increase the Hamilton County sales tax by either 0.5%, 0.75%, or 1%. The 0.5% option will not solve Metro's deficit problem or expand any service. The 2 larger proposals would address those issues. The current sales tax in Hamilton County is 7%. So I guess the question becomes, obviously, a 0.5 cent really doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, I'm not going to get into what makes sense or not, but the numbers speak for themselves. We have challenges on both the operating and capital side of the ledger. And so we don't have the ability to get a lot of federal money to be able to replace buses and that sort of thing, or state money. And so we would still have a capital deficit that's pretty substantial, even with a 0.5 cent. Even though it generates more revenue, it just shows you just how bad off we are.
What other solutions are you looking at, beyond a tax levy? Because, like you mentioned before, the board is still kind of debating what the best approach will be, what the most effective approach would be, and I imagine that a tax levy, if it were proposed, probably isn't the only solution you are investigating or pursuing. Can you talk a little bit about what other solutions there might be?
Well, to be able to close this kind of hole, it would take a very creative solutions to be able to do that. But certainly one of the things that we're trying to do now is we're always looking for ways to be able to reduce our expenses, certainly. And so we've done some of that. In fact, we self-insured our health insurance plan this year for the first time and saved $1 million annually. We've got a wellness program where we're working with our employees not only to improve their health, but also help slow the growth of that. We're looking at diversifying our fleet, our bus fleet, so that will help some on the capital side, but also helping on the operating side. We have a fleet of 40-foot buses for the most part.
I got to drive one of them.
Yes, I saw that. Don't quit your day job.
Ouch.
Wow.
It's a tough job.
It is.
And so we're looking at diversifying the fleet to be able to reduce some expenses there. And then more advertising on vehicles to be able to generate revenue. Certainly a fare increase is always something that's possible. But short of when you have in round numbers, $100 million budget, and 54% of it is one source, there isn't a whole lot of places that we can go to be able to generate additional revenue outside of that.
How does marketing to younger communities fit into there? Do we have
only
time to talk about that?
We have a little bit of time left, but I do want you to answer if you can quickly. When will you know about the levy?
That's a question that I'm waiting for the board to decide. Certainly, I would hope that within the next couple of months that decision is going to be made, what they're going to do one way or the other. But we certainly are we're still planning as an organization to continue to try to grow our service. And so we're not planning on doing anything other than that right now.
Well, as you can tell, Pat and I have plenty more questions
Yes,
for you.
you do.
Unfortunately, we don't have enough time. Maybe we can have you back sometime.
Well, thank you. I'd be delighted to come back.
I think there are a lot of questions, and I think a lot of you probably have a lot of questions, and hopefully this has been a great conversation that you've been able to take something away from. We know we have. Dwight Ferrell, Pat LaFleur, thanks so much for being here and talking to us.
Thank you.
By the way, 9 on Your Side has been covering the streetcar closely for you. Up next, we're going to look at what are the places where blockages have been most common and what is being done to fix that.